The most iconic cars of the 1940s to 60s were hiding some of the dumbest design mistakes ever put on wheels. Behind the chrome, the tail fins, and the nostalgia lies a shocking list of engineering blunders that ruined cars, reputations, and in some cases, lives. Here are the 10 dumbest design choices automakers made in the 1940s to 60s. Number 10. Ford invested a staggering $250 million into the Edsel project. They wanted to create something radically different. The infamous horse collar grille became the stuff of automotive legend. But what if I told you that the grille everyone loves to hate wasn't actually the reason the Edsel failed? In fact, the real culprit was something far more mundane and entirely preventable. So what actually killed this chrome-covered dream? The answer is quality control, or rather, the complete lack of it. Ford made a critical mistake. Instead of giving the Edsel its own dedicated assembly line, they forced workers to build Edsels, Fords, and Mercurys on the same production lines. The result? Cars rolled off the lot with misaligned panels, doors that wouldn't close, and push buttons that didn't push. Combine that with a recession hitting right as the car launched, and you've got yourself a perfect storm of failure. Number 9. When Chevrolet introduced the Corvair in 1960, they were proud. Here was America's answer to the Volkswagen Beetle, a compact rear-engine car with European flair. Motor Trend even crowned it Car of the Year. But beneath the shine was a danger that would rewrite federal safety rules. The Corvair used a swing-axle rear suspension, a design that could cause severe oversteer. For drivers unfamiliar with this handling characteristic, the results could be catastrophic. The rear wheels would tuck under during aggressive cornering, causing the car to flip or spin out of control. But the real shock came from what was happening inside GM. Here's the twist. GM engineers knew about this problem. They had developed suspension upgrades that would have fixed the handling issues. The cost? Just a few dollars per car. But GM's bean counters said no. They declined to include these life-saving improvements on the 1960 to 1963 models to save money. The consequences were devastating. Over 100 lawsuits piled up. Then consumer advocate Ralph Nader published Unsafe at Any Speed in 1965, dedicating a large portion to the Corvair's dangers. GM tried to discredit Nader, which only made things worse. The scandal helped establish the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and mandatory safety testing. By 1964, Chevrolet had already fixed the suspension. The second-generation Corvair, launched in 1965, had a completely redesigned, fully independent rear suspension that handled beautifully. But it was too late. The damage was done, and the Corvair's reputation never recovered. And while Chevrolet's missteps were unfolding, another automaker was making a completely different kind of mistake. Number 8. Triumph had big dreams for the American market. They wanted to offer luxury in a small package, something that appealed to upscale buyers who wanted prestige without the size. The problem? You can't just miniaturize luxury and expect it to work. The Mayflower borrowed styling cues from Rolls-Royce and Bentley, with a formal upright design complete with a prominent grille and dignified proportions. But the proportions were all wrong. The body was heavy, built to suggest substance and quality, but underneath sat a tiny engine borrowed from the standard 10, producing barely enough power to move the car. Top speed was 63 miles per hour. The Mayflower's failure teaches us a crucial lesson. Design doesn't scale linearly. What works at one size can become grotesque at another. Number 7. Introduced in 1957, the Trabant P50 and its successor, the 601, became symbols of everything wrong with centrally planned economies. But the real story begins with its construction. Let's start with the body, made from Duraplast, a material composed of recycled cotton waste and resin. Sounds innovative, right? Except it was brittle, difficult to repair, and virtually impossible to recycle. The Eastern Bloc's answer to fiberglass turned out to be more like hardened cardboard. But the real star of this disaster show was the engine. A two-stroke, 18-horsepower motor that produced smoke wherever it went. Performance was equally dismal. The unsynchronized manual transmission required wrestler's strength to operate. Fuel economy was poor despite the tiny engine. The Trabant manufacturer tried to save face in 1989 with the Trabant 1.1, featuring a Volkswagen four-stroke engine. Too little, too late. Number 6. In Europe, the Renault Dauphine was a sensation. It was affordable, economical, and perfect for narrow European streets. But when it crossed the Atlantic, something went terribly wrong. First, there was the performance. Road and Track tested the Dauphine and found it took 32 seconds to accelerate from 0 to 60 miles per hour. But the main issue was rust. See, Renault didn't account for American winters and the salt-strewn roads that came with them. Here's what happened. A Dauphine would experience one New York winter, just one, and the front fenders would literally disintegrate. The rust was so catastrophic, so immediate, and so predictable that Renault apologized. Their advertisements for the successor model, the Renault 8, literally marketed it as the Renault for people who swore they wouldn't buy another one. Think about that for a moment. A car company's marketing strategy was essentially admitting their previous car was so terrible that they needed to convince people who'd been burned once to give them another chance. Number 5. Nash had a vision to create a small, luxurious second car for affluent families. Developer George Mason wanted it to be a big car in miniature, combining American style with British engineering. The concept seemed sound. Post-war prosperity was rising, families could afford second cars, and women were becoming more independent drivers. But Nash misread the market completely. The Metropolitan suffered from poor performance, awful handling, and reliability issues. But the fundamental miscalculation was this. America was trending toward bigger, not smaller. The Metropolitan was fighting against the current, trying to sell restraint and efficiency in an era of excess and horsepower. Number 4. Released in 1963, the Hillman Imp was supposed to be Britain's answer to the wildly successful Mini. The Roots Group had high hopes and massive investments riding on this little car. On paper, it looked brilliant. The Imp featured cutting-edge design elements, an aluminum engine block for weight savings, an opening rear window that worked with a folding back seat to create surprising cargo space, and excellent road handling. But then reality hit. The Imp was plagued by a decision to manufacture it at a brand new, purpose-built plant in Linwood, Scotland. Sounds good, right? New facility, fresh start, modern equipment. Except the workforce was inexperienced, quality control was non-existent, and the design itself had been rushed into production within just 3 years. Gearboxes failed constantly. Water pumps died with predictable regularity. The engine cooling system was so inadequate that motors overheated routinely. Panel fit was atrocious. This was a systemic failure of manufacturing and development. But here's the truly baffling design choice. The Imp used a rear engine, rear wheel drive layout. Why is this baffling? Because the Mini had already proven that front engine, front wheel drive was the superior layout for small cars. The Mini's transverse engine design revolutionized compact car packaging. It maximized interior space and provided predictable handling. So why did Roots go the opposite direction? Stubbornness? Pride? A misguided belief they could do it better? Whatever the reason, it was wrong. The Imp never came close to Mini sales. It financially crippled the Roots Group, leading to a Chrysler takeover in 1967. A 2008 survey of 4,000 motorists ranked it the 5th worst British car ever made. Number 3. In 1968, entrepreneur Malcolm Bricklin discovered a loophole in U.S. automotive safety standards. Cars under a certain weight were exempt from safety regulations, so he imported the Subaru 360 and marketed it with the slogan, "Cheap and ugly does it." The Subaru 360 was Japan's answer to ultra-compact urban transportation. In its home market, it made sense. Narrow streets, expensive fuel, limited parking. But in America, it was a rolling death trap. Consumer Reports tested thousands of vehicles over the decades, but only a handful ever received their most damning verdict: unacceptably hazardous. So what did the Subaru 360 do to earn this rare distinction? Well, the 360 took 37.5 seconds to accelerate from 0 to 50 miles per hour. That's dangerous enough on its own. But the acceleration was nothing compared to the crash test. In a 30-mile-per-hour collision with a standard car, the Subaru 360 crumpled like a tin can. And the bumpers? Consumer Reports described them as virtually useless against anything more formidable than a watermelon. And imports ceased in 1970. Number 2. The Isetta was a microcar designed in Italy and licensed to BMW for German production. It had one cylinder, 12 horsepower, and achieved 78 miles per gallon. The Isetta's design was baffling. It had a single front door that swung open with the steering wheel attached. The bubble-shaped body made it instantly recognizable. The fundamental design choice that doomed the Isetta was prioritizing fuel economy over literally everything else. Yes, 78 miles per gallon is impressive. But when your car is slower, less stable, and less safe, what's the point? Number 1. For decades, automotive engineers designed cars with rigid steering columns aimed straight at the driver's chest. This was standard practice across the industry, from economy cars to luxury vehicles. In a frontal crash, drivers faced a hidden weapon built into their own vehicle: one that automakers knew about but continued using anyway. The steering column would shove the wheel hub into the driver with devastating force. There was no energy-absorbing section to collapse, no crumple zone, just a solid steel spear pointed directly at your sternum. The 1958 Chevrolet Impala and most full-size Chevrolets from the 1950s through mid-1960s exemplified this deadly design choice. When these beautiful chrome-laden machines hit something head-on, the rigid column would be driven back into the driver's chest with catastrophic results. Evidence mounted throughout the era that collapsible columns could dramatically reduce fatal chest injuries. European manufacturers began implementing safety designs earlier, but American automakers resisted. This deadly layout persisted well into the 1960s on popular family cars, station wagons, and pickup trucks, vehicles that parents drove with their children in the front seat. The resistance to change cost countless lives before safety regulations finally forced manufacturers to adopt collapsible steering columns as standard equipment. So after seeing all these disasters, which design flaw do you think was the worst, and did any of them surprise you? If you enjoyed this breakdown of automotive misfires, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and stick around for more surprising stories from car history.